Joined here by Longmont's Chief of Public Safety, Chief Mike Butler. Chief, we have had some pretty public disagreements over the last year or two, so I greatly appreciate you coming on the program.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And by the way, while I have you right here, I'd like to invite you to Longmont. And I'd like you to see all the incredible services, the innovative services we have in public safety within the community, and actually to see our community as well. Our community is a great community. There's a lot of volunteerism. There's a lot of people who are willing to put themselves second in terms of helping other people. So the invitation is there for you to come to Longmont, Kyle.
Invitation accepted. I was last in Longmont about a month or two ago, and it's a rapidly changing community as well.
It is.
Yeah, let's talk about what's going on up there, and also talk about your thoughts about the state of media and law enforcement in the community and that kind of thing. So full disclosure for anybody who's watching the full unedited version on YouTube, you may be thinking, Kyle sounds a little funny, like he's half in the bag. I just had some dental work done and I can't feel half my face. I assure you I am sober as a gopher, but to everybody watching the extended version, you're going to see my questions and they're going to be a little garbled. The Chief has agreed to put up with this. So, Chief, you have been outspoken in your view of the media these days. I want to read you something that you wrote, which is, the media is happy to tell us all the reasons why we should be afraid. An industry that profits off assigning blame and marketing fear and fault. It sounds like you have a pretty dim view of journalists.
You know, I understand what that sounds like, but what I want to say too is I think the media plays an incredibly valuable role in our society. We know that the media is there to be a monitor for government, especially police, to ensure that we're transparent, to ensure that the stewardship of our dollars and our resources are where they need to be. But a lot of what I wrote about there, Kyle, comes from people who I have spoken with in the community in terms of where they get their news, why they feel the fear they feel, and so it's not just the media, but at some level social networks as well. And so what I'm trying to say, and there's more to that article that I wrote, is that there's a lot of great things going on in our community, as every community. And I like to say that for every bad thing that happens, there's 1,000 good things that happen. And sometimes we focus so much on the one over and over and over again that almost becomes the defining truth of what really exists. And at some level, it's more difficult to create a future, a desired future that we really want to create. So it's not so much against the media in terms of how it plays out. I'm not a believer that there's a lot of fake news or the media is the enemy of the people, but I do believe the media has this incredible potential to bring out the goodness in all of our communities and talk about the 1,000 as well as the one.
So I noticed that you were pretty carefully and tactfully talking about what the media could be doing, but it sounds like what you're describing when you've written about media is what the media is doing. So let's talk about that. How would you assess the state of local media in your community, Longmont, in the Denver media market, in Colorado more generally?
So in our community, I think the media is more local, more tied in and integrated with the community. They see more of what's happening. They see the good that's happening. And many of the stories in our local media are reflective of what's happening. It's balanced. They're also willing to call us on things that maybe they think we could be doing differently in terms of transparency, in terms of stewardship of our dollars, in terms of competency, in terms of the work we're doing. And the Denver media, I think, is a little bit more separated out from our local communities. And I know it's impossible for Channel 2, 4, 7, 9, 31 to dig into everything that's going on in our communities. And so I just wonder sometimes whether or not the media just kind of gravitates towards the one. And I wish that they would do more of the 1,000. And so I think they're a little less connected to the local communities at large.
So here's the thing. I don't really disagree with your assessment in that you are describing the worst of media and you're describing the things that a lot of journalists hate about media. You're describing stuff that we rant against here on this program. But I take issue with the fact that you use that to paint the media with a broad brush. I could talk to you about the worst in law enforcement, but we both know that that's not representative of law enforcement. You see what I'm saying?
So fair enough. And I get that. But again, the comments that I hear from the community in terms of their sense of fear and why they don't feel safe often comes from what they hear about or read about within the media.
Specifically, what does that mean in Longmont? What do people tell you that you say that is detached from reality?
So what I hear and what I put in my op-ed is that crime is spiraling in our community, that our gang issue is significant, that women are dying of domestic violence, that issues with our undocumented immigrants in our community that are causing a lot of the crime. I think a lot of that comes mostly from the national media and maybe some from the statewide Denver media as well. And so that's a force we have to encounter. We don't want people to feel fear when there's no need to feel fear. And so that's where I come from.
And yes, the media does cover anecdotes, and then people tend to think of those as trends and so forth if they string together a couple in their minds. So what, in your view, is the best way for law enforcement to get out its message? I've also been critical of this new trend where law enforcement wants to act as its own independent press. I'm all for people getting their message out, but the idea of armed actors of the state acting also as the check on government seems bonkers to me. But how do you think law enforcement should do it?
Well, and I agree with that. And by the way, I don't use the term law enforcement, I use the term policing, because some of what we do is enforcement, but most of what we do is not enforcement.
Explain the difference, if you would.
So, I would say 60 to 70% of the calls we go on don't have a crime attached to them. And so we're often going on calls for service that people call us for a variety of reasons. And so the other 30 to 40% have a crime attached to them. And so we're there with the enforcement mode that we're in. But I don't necessarily disagree with that law enforcement shouldn't be its own communicator to the community about what's happening. I also think there's purpose in terms of them offering a state of public safety within a community. I think that's important. And that's what those op-eds or those pieces that you read were reflective of. And I'm going to just say to you, Kyle, I appreciate the question in terms of how we can do business better. And I'm going to kind of reflect back to you, or kind of turn this around and say, I offer a partnership with you and Channel 9 News or any other news station to work with us to see how we can get that message out.
Can I ask you
that would be
this?
Critical.
Should police partner with the press? I don't know that they should. I think that we each serve vital community functions, but I don't know that we should partner. And here's the thing: I've done campaigns with Denver police on believing sex assault victims, so that their cases can be identified. I did one with Aurora Police just last week about suicide prevention. But when you say partner, that makes me uncomfortable. Do you get that?
Yeah, I get that. And I think each of us have to maintain the integrity of the roles we play. I think we can sustain and develop a partnership, sustain keeping that integrity of the roles we play. But I also think we ought to be doing it for the good of the whole and the good of the community. And so if that partnership serves the good of the whole and the good of the community, then I think that partnership is worth it. It doesn't mean you're in our back pocket, or we're going to give you news and we're going to be propaganding what we're doing. That's not where I'm coming from. Maintain the integrity of the media that it has to maintain, but we're working closely enough so that we can work for the good of the community.
So, not looking to rehash the past here, but we get some viewer concerns from people in Longmont who, there are a number of people who have written in who say, I enjoy your program. You seem like a good guy. I also know the chief. I think he's a good guy. The two of you should have a conversation instead of always fighting with each other. People said, you guys talked about Longmont and those warrantless searches for too long. And what I would tell people is, well, we're going to talk about it until we think the problem's been fixed. Why did it take so long to get from the beginning, where Longmont Police were defending everything that they were doing, to the end, which is when you came forward to the community and said, you know what, we've made some mistakes, we're not going to do it again, and we're going to look to strengthen the ties that are broken. Now, why did it take so long to get there?
Well, first of all, here's what I want to say to Channel 9 and to you personally, Kyle. You did bring an issue to our attention. And as a result of you bringing that issue to our attention, we were able to heal something in our community that needed to be healed. And we were able to fix something within police that needed to be fixed. We devoted a lot of resources after this event and these circumstances came about, to ensuring that our training and our officers knew exactly what they needed to do in terms of ensuring that the constitutional rights of people were protected. So I want to say thank you. In terms of length of time, a lot of that had to do with investigations that were being completed. A lot of it had to do with the investigation that had to be completed over time. And so we were very willing and wanting to come forward, but we couldn't do it until all of that was done, and until at some level we were able to resolve our issue with the ACLU as well. And so, and when the investigation was done and the issue with the ACLU was resolved, and by the way, it turned out well. We actually did a restorative process between the two police officers and the residents at the suites. And we did a lot more in terms of when we were done with the settlement, the city manager, Harold Dominguez, and I went into the residents and went into the ACLU representatives and personally offered an apology for what happened. And so a lot of that had to take time, and it wasn't something we could control as much as we just had to let that play out the way it needed to play out.
Let me ask you a different type of question. So this might amuse you, but I became a journalist because I did not appreciate the way that my small town was portrayed in the media following a series of tragic events. Why did you become a police officer?
Well, I think the classic answer is because I wanted to help people. And so I felt like I wanted to serve in that capacity. And I wanted to be able to serve in a profession where I think we can have great effect with people who are having maybe the worst days of their life, or we can help with a community that might be suffering through a series of tragedies. That's something that has always appealed to me. And at some level, rising up through the ranks and becoming police and public safety chief, I wanted to have more influence in terms of how that happened. And so we've done a lot of, one of the things that I would like for you to see when you come to Longmont is the innovation that we've put in place in terms of how we're working with people who are struggling with health and or social issues around mental health, around addiction, and around people struggling with homelessness. And so we've gotten out of the business of always invoking our criminal justice system for those issues because we believe that that hasn't been effective. And so we've put things in place like the Angel Initiative, like LEAD, like restorative justice, and we've had those restorative justice in place for years. And that's something that's always been exciting to me, to be able to offer our officers options that could be more effective when they're confronting people in the community and ultimately make our communities safer. And so I would love to, and I would invite you to see those programs as well.
I will take you up on that invitation. Chief Butler, thank you for coming in. I've enjoyed our conversation. We will provide links if people want to read your previous writings on the media as well when they see this conversation on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for coming down for the conversation.
You're welcome, Kyle. Thank you.